Okay, so a different kind of power rankings now through 5 weeks. It's been a very fun series so far. If this is the first time you're watching, the way this works is this is simply based on an algorithm that I created using previous seasons and how well you perform in a certain positional group, how well that affects how many points you get or how many points less that you give up, how that equates to wins, and how many total wins you end up with. So I created the algorithm. I am not, however, using my own personal opinions on where each of these teams placed. It's all based simply on Pro Football Focus's grades. I wanted it out of my hands. So if you want to, complain about any of this stuff, take it up with PFF. I'm using their grades instead of my own just to sort of make sure I'm not having any of my own subconscious biases coming into play. So because of that, there's no predictions here. It is simply what we have seen through 5 weeks that are coming into play, which I think is actually part of the fun of it. So yeah, I think it's an interesting week. We're getting to the point where we're starting to get to know these teams a little bit better, although there's certainly still some volatility. But I think that, after week 1, when it said the Broncos were going 17-0, now we kind of are, a bigger sample size has sort of weeded out some of the odd choices, but there's still a few that are a bit head-scratching. But I think for the most part, we're getting to the point where some of this stuff feels like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's just get into it. So here we go. Starting off, how about them Cowboys at number 1? And listen, there's kind of been a number 1 curse a little bit where whichever team gets number 1 immediately falls off, it seems. Like the Rams were number 1, lost to the Cardinals. The Raiders were number 1, lost back-to-back. So maybe this is a bad thing that they're number 1. But as of right now, you think about it and you look down the board, well, what feels wrong here? Tier 1 receiving core, that checks out. Tier 1 running back room, that checks out, I would say. Good offensive line, Tier 1 offensive line, and then Tier 2 quarterback. All of that, I think you could make a legit argument is true. Maybe the running game won't be Tier 1 for the entire season, and that would, knock a couple wins off. But still, that's a really good offense. To me, the only real concern, the main concern I have about the Cowboys right now is that coverage being Tier 1, 3 wins there. How legit is that, or how much of that is just Trayvon Diggs, getting a lot of interceptions early, which obviously that's not luck, but there is a luck component to it, and you expect that he won't have an interception in every game through 17 weeks, and I know that PFF does, grade that stuff highly, so with that kind of going away, how good will this coverage be? But it still is a much better coverage than we expected. I predicted it, I think, to be Tier 5, so even if it's Tier 3, that's still a huge upgrade, and that's a championship contender if everything else stays the same and their coverage unit goes from great to mediocre. It's still a championship contender, so great news for the Dallas Cowboys. Number 2, this is the real shocker with the Cincinnati Bengals up here. Now, in fairness, you see that, number 2 and 7 are all kind of, within 1.7 or I guess 1.63 wins of each other. So that's part of it. But still, being a top 7 team is great for Cincinnati. A big chunk of it as well is Joe Mixon giving them 2.5 wins. That running back room can be very impactful. And again, we're just talking about how they've played through 5 weeks. So when you think about it that way, this is a team that's played well enough to be 4-1. The field goal stuff, which as you see, didn't mention this in the beginning, but all kicking has been the same. I might at a certain point go over to kicking percentage and actually start, factoring that stuff in as well. But I just feel like with kicking, really too small sample size early on, even in, sort of this thing where I'm kind of building it off of small sample size. But still, Cincinnati's played very well. Tier 2 quarterback play from Burrow, Tier 2 wide receiver play, which is very good. Their coverage has been good. So all of that stuff, factoring in, they're a good team. The question is just how much of this will continue. Will stuff drop off? Number 3, you have the Arizona Cardinals, who, through 5 weeks have looked awesome. They haven't lost, so it's kind of surprising that there's a couple teams that have lost ahead of them, especially one of those who lost multiple times. But I think the Cardinals have looked really well. The only real issue with the Cardinals right now is their running game and the way they stopped the running game. That's been a bit of an issue. But other than that, there's tier 1s or tier 2s across the board. Kyler is also only getting a tier 2, which I actually agree with. I think that he's been very good. I think that they had him at 6. Like, that checks out to me. Although you could also, there's a couple guys that I would say he's been above that PFF does not have him above. So there you go. But the offensive line is also tier 2, which obviously helps a lot. So really good team. Cardinals looking like a championship contender so far this season. One step below Tampa Bay. I mean, their offense is loaded, right? Tier 1 quarterback play, tier 1 offensive line. Still only tier 2 wide receiver room. I would suspect that by the end of the season, that would move up to tier 1. And they're even getting some points in the running back room, which I didn't really expect preseason. Their issue is just defense. I mean, their tier 3 coverage unit probably feels a bit generous, and I think a lot of that came from Matt Ryan throwing the ball directly to Tampa Bay players in that game. Because other than that, this defense is looking rough. However, 11.9 wins is still very good, and with guys getting healthy, you hope you can add like maybe an extra win to the defense and really turn this into the championship contender we expected them to be preseason, and their offense still looking loaded. Next up, a top 5 team with a sub 500 record. So this is surprising to me, and there's going to be a couple that make me wonder, like, and I want to be clear, I don't believe this algorithm is perfect. There probably are some flaws in it, and in fact, maybe in doing this series, we can learn those flaws. I would also say that, you know, one of the problems and one of the reasons why everyone hates every power rankings is that when you see 32 selections, you're going to sit here and say, oh my God, how could you have this team instead of that team? You don't think about the fact that, you know, you agree with 28 of them and there's only 4 that you disagree with. You think about the 4 that you disagree with. So that's kind of that's just something that exists with these kind of videos in general. So I don't want to completely write it off when I see one that's surprising, although this one certainly is surprising. But let's look into it. Let's see why it is. I mean, their quarterback being tier 1 checks out. Kirk has been great through 5 weeks. Their receiving room being tier 2, I think that checks out. Running back room being tier, I believe that's either 4 or 5. You get 0 for both. To me, this is the exact reason why the Vikings, and this is the same thing they had last year, where they had a lot of expected wins due to the algorithm, but underperformed in terms of how much wins they actually had. And I think the reasoning is coaching. This run-first offense just doesn't make a lot of sense when you have Kirk Cousins, you have Adam Thielen, you have Justin Jefferson. I mean, that's the strength of your team, right? So why are you going away from that strength to run the ball almost as much as you're throwing the ball? That just doesn't make as much sense. So I actually think that one of the issues with the algorithm is it doesn't take coaching into account, which doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that that's something you have to notice going in. It's an asterisk next to each team's grades is the coaching aspect. I think you could argue similar to like the Cincinnati Bengals, where Zach Taylor doesn't run a great offense. He might not be getting as many wins, at least that's my opinion. He might not be getting as many wins as the algorithm says he should be getting, similar to the Minnesota Vikings. So that's kind of the way I view this. Next, number 6, the Green Bay Packers. I mean, you know, they were one of the worst teams after week 1. They've really improved since then, and, you know, they're 4-1, so it makes sense that 4 straight wins is going to have you climb up the power rankings. The tier 1 receiving core is awesome for Green Bay because, you know, what the story of Green Bay is that it's all Devontae Adams, right? And while he's certainly had a huge impact in that being tier 1, the other role players have stepped up and been good. I mean, Rodgers is still only getting credit for tier 3 quarterback play. Again, a huge chunk of that is just going to come from that bad first week. That's, you know, all these games are counted as the same, so that's just it's gonna take some time to overcome for sure. However, tier 1 O-line, and you're getting points across the board in the defensive category, they're currently at 11.12 wins, so good on them for continuing to climb up the ladder. Seattle at number 7, so this is another one that it's a perfect example of why you have to just understand this in context, because Seattle, I actually kind of agree. It's like Seattle is the team kind of for this system. They have a great quarterback. They have a great receiving game, and even their offensive line has been solid this season. The issue is just that now Russell Wilson is hurt. So that's kind of the issue, is that basically the main reason that they're looking good is because of those 4 wins Russell Wilson should get them. Now that Russell Wilson can't get them those wins, it's going to be a lot more difficult, and they're already 2-3. They've already kind of underperformed the way they should have performed, so that's looking tough. Number 8, how about those Baltimore Ravens? Lamar being tier 1, that checks out. And what's even crazier about this is not including the running game. This is simply just passing. Lamar is tier 1. I think a lot of that is set up due to the running game. So that might be a factor, but still tier 1 there. And then again, I think you could argue the same thing with the receiving room, which is teams are trying to stop the run. It makes stuff open easier for the receivers. And while PFF does take that into consideration, how much, and when guys are getting open, you're still going to get a higher grade. That's my understanding of it. Tier 1 there, you could argue, well, what happens when teams start trying to take away the pass? Well, then you're going to get a lot more wins through the running game. So it's looking very good for Baltimore right here. All right, so next 8 here. So the Buffalo Bills, this has been consistently a team, and listen, I think this is actually a little bit more fair than some people are going to give it credit for. There's definitely going to be some people who say, Bills at 9, your list sucks, Jackson, what are you even doing? This algorithm makes no sense. Well, no, I mean, again, keep in mind, this is not predicting anything. I think us being rational football fans say, okay, week 1 against Pittsburgh, that was just kind of a weird week. You can't really pay too much attention to that. Yeah, it wasn't a great week, but they bounced back strong. Even when they beat the Dolphins 35-0, their offense didn't look that great, weirdly, if you go back and watch that game. So maybe you could argue those first couple of weeks. But then we see the next 3, I'm like, okay, no, the Bills are awesome. Well, this algorithm takes all of that into consideration. So again, it's not a flaw in the algorithm. It's just an added context you have to understand when going through it. But even that being said, I'm still surprised that Josh Allen is only a tier 3 quarterback here. I'd have him as tier 2 or tier 1. Still surprised the offensive line is tier 5. Still surprised that the wide receiving room is tier 3. And a huge surprise that the running game is tier 1. So, part of that is just Josh. Actually, a huge chunk of that is Josh Allen running himself. That's actually been a big chunk of that because, again, that's how it works, which I think is fine. I think that makes sense. And actually, now that I think about it a little bit more, well, Josh Allen running with the football does actually impact this offense a good way. So I don't think that's actually crazy once you start thinking about it. And when you start adding on, Josh Allen, you put him in tier 1 category if you want to, at least tier 2. You put that receiving room up. You put that offensive line up. Their coverage being tier 1, that checks out. It's been awesome. This could easily jump from number 9 to, I wouldn't be shocked next week if it's number 2 or even 1. Number 10, your Los Angeles Chargers. So this is interesting, right? A big chunk of this has been Justin Herbert and how fantastic he has been. That's obviously a big part of it. Another 4 wins for him, but they're still getting points basically all across the board except for run defense right here. So, maybe people are wondering that I'm assuming the Chargers are going to be a lot higher on most people's power rankings than on this one. Where's the difference here? Well, here they only have a tier 3 wide receiving room, so there's some wins getting left on the board right there. That's a chunk of it. And maybe some stuff on defense you could argue, although definitely last week was both defenses kind of struggled against each other, but still, it's worth looking at the actual total wins, not just looking at the placement. They're at 10.66 total wins. Again, the number 2 team is at 12.73, so they're just 2 wins away from being the second best team in football. So there's a big pile up really from, number 15 all the way to number 2. Those are only about 3 wins separating those. So that's kind of another part of it. Number 11, the Raiders, who I actually kind of agree with all of this, quite frankly. Defense, tier 1 coverage and pass rush, that checks out to me. Offensive line, tier 5, yeah. And by the way, PFF had them by far as the worst offensive line in football right now, which it hasn't been good. There's no way around that. You look at it, it definitely hasn't been good. The quarterback room is at tier 2, which I think is fair. Derek Carr's been very good. I don't think he's tier 1. I think he is tier 2. I think that's fair. Wide receiving room is tier 3. I think that's fair as well. Some people are really overrating this receiving room. They have a lot of options. Darren Waller is awesome, but there's just a lot of good receiving rooms. That's kind of what people miss, is how many good receiving cores there are. So, hey, 10.49 wins, that's enough to get you into the playoffs for the Raiders. So it's not a horrible situation whatsoever, even after a bad couple of weeks. The question, though, is what was the fluke, right? Were the last 2 weeks the fluke, or were the first 3 weeks the fluke? And now you have a new head coach. So They're an interesting team. They're definitely a team I could see getting a lot better or a lot worse. That's kind of been the Raiders' story these past few years. It's hard to get a handle on this team. Number 12, the Cleveland Browns right here. So again, my preseason Super Bowl pick has a little bit underperformed so far. A couple of losses. That loss to the Chargers, it was just kind of a crazy game. Tier 1 offensive line, very good. Tier 3 quarterback, kind of what we expect from Baker. Receiving core has been a bit underwhelming at Tier 3, I would say. It's something that preseason I had as Tier 1, so that's been a chunk of it. And then their defense had a disappointing week last week, so that kind of cost them some points as well. But again, they're in this sort of log jam in between the 10 and the 12.5 win mark. Number 13, the Rams, again, another team that, these are basically all teams that are tied is the way you should look at it. I mean, if you're a win away, you're essentially, when you play each other, it's as close to a 50-50 shot of one team winning. It probably would come down to matchups. But why are they here? Tier 2 offensive line, Tier 3 quarterback play. I think some people are going to say, wait a second, Matt Stafford's in the MVP consideration, and PFF has him as Tier 3. What are they thinking? It's actually not crazy. He has missed some throws. I think I would have him as Tier 2, not Tier 3, but still, I don't think it's as crazy as some people might think. Wide receiving room being Tier 2, that checks out to me. And then their defense not being very great. They don't have a ton of points right now in the defensive category. Although part of me wonders with that, is their defense bad, or did they just have to play both Tampa Bay and Arizona? I think probably it's because they had to play Tampa Bay and Arizona. I think that's what I would have to suspect is why it's worse. So I think that you're going to get, the coverage is going to go up. The pass rush probably goes up a little. You're probably adding an extra win there and probably an extra win in the quarterback room. That alone gets you to, over 12, which is putting you as a top, 3 or 4 team in football. Number 14, the Denver Broncos. They're another team that has fallen to the, getting in first place curse, where they were week 1 first place and have certainly fallen since then. And, they're starting to become more of the team we kind of thought they would be in terms of offense, I feel like. Solid offensive line, good receiving core, mediocre quarterback. I mean, Bridgewater, Tier 3. That's still a lot better than I think we would have thought heading into this season. So that's still good. The defense has kind of been the disappointment, right? I mean, the coverage these past couple of weeks hasn't been good. There's no getting around it. And you can, argue it's scheme. I would argue it's scheme, but that's typically what's been Vic Fangio's biggest selling point, right? He's not the best, sort of leader necessarily, but he's a great X's and O's guy. Well, now the scheme has become an issue. So that's a huge issue for Denver. They're sitting here at 14. Coverage has to get better if this team is going to make the playoffs, probably. Number 15, the New Orleans Saints, who are just a really tough team to get a handle on. Quarterback play is now Tier 4 with Jameis Winston. Offensive line, which is usually a strength, has not been this season. Wide receiving room, which we thought was going to be a big weakness, has actually played pretty well. And the running back room, of course, Alvin Kamara, he's earned those 2.5 wins. And then with defense, you're getting some points there. Kind of a weird team. I still want to see just a bigger sample size. They're the kind of team that, Kyle and I were joking on the podcast, like, it's going to be week 15 and we're going to have no idea what they are. I mean, they're a difficult team to get a handle on. They are. Number 16, another team kind of a little bit difficult to get a handle on, the Philadelphia Eagles right here, who are currently in the top half of the league according to this, and they are 2-3. They're not a horrible team. You got good offensive line, Tier 3 quarterback play, Tier 3 wide receiver play, and then you're just getting some points across the board everywhere. So, Tier 1 pass rush also helps a lot. So they're just kind of a team where it's like they don't have a ton of flaws, and so a really good team can go to them and beat them. But when you're playing these mediocre or bad teams, it's kind of advantage Philadelphia in that sense, right? Where you kind of are in a situation where if the team doesn't necessarily have elite components to beat you, well, then there's not really a great way to beat them because they're kind of decent everywhere. Number 17, you have the Tennessee Titans. So Titans are, again, they're kind of a weird team. They're 3-2, although they are currently in the bottom half. And I actually kind of agree with both. Because, again, it's not predicting. It's only talking about what we've seen so far. They play the Bills on Monday Night Football. That could be a tough one. And the Chiefs. the week after before a big matchup against the Colts. That, I mean, Colts are 1-4, but they still could be their biggest competition in the AFC South. In fact, I think they are, given that the other two teams are the Texans and the Jaguars. But to me, the biggest disappointment for the Titans has just been the wide receiving core. Now, the running game, that's going to get back to tier 1. It's not tier 1 right now. Pencil that and add another 1.9 wins to the Titans, which would put them higher because Derrick Henry is awesome. The receiving core has been disappointing, though. It's something that, I had it as tier 2 in the preseason, and people said I was too low and it should have been tier 1. Well, now it's tier 4. So they got to figure something out. And part of that has just, actually, a huge part of that has been injuries. So hopefully they just get healthy and get better. Number 18, another disappointment. In fact, we got a lot of disappointments, I think, on this panel of the New England Patriots who, I think what are the big disappointments here? To me, it's offensive line and coverage. Offensive line tier 4, coverage tier 3. I think we expected both of those to be better. The quarterback room being tier 3 is actually kind of a pleasant surprise, I would say. Same thing with wide receiving room. Offense hasn't been horrible, although it's certainly, nothing is above tier 3, so that's also kind of a bit of a concern. In fact, nothing above this entire team is a tier 3, so that's kind of the issue with the New England Patriots. A lot of it is just, what are they great at? Really nothing. Well, I mean, they're great at coaching. That obviously factors in, but that's the main thing. Number 19, the San Francisco 49ers. So again, another team that's been a bit disappointing. I think part of it is the quarterback room being tier 5 right now, and that's it's been tough with Jimmy Garoppolo and with Trey Lance. Lance has looked like a solid rookie, I think, but he's still a rookie quarterback, so you don't expect much from him immediately. And Jimmy Garoppolo was a little bit disappointing, quite frankly. So that's a huge chunk. I mean, you get 4 wins there for a tier 1 quarterback. That's how much you can get in that category. Getting 0, it's just tough to field a great team around that. If they were just getting, you throw on 2 wins, well, now this is looking like a playoff team. So they just got to find a way to get mediocre quarterback play, which I still think they can do. I would also say the receiving core has been a bit disappointing at tier 3, but that's something I could see getting better. Number 20, you have the Kansas City Chiefs. So yeah, I mean, the team that many people thought were going back to the Super Bowl, maybe winning it. In fact, I think that, they might have been favorites to win it. I'm not sure heading into the season. They were certainly going to be high up. They're currently 2-3 right now and currently number 20 on this list with, a huge chunk of it is, hey, their offensive line's actually been pretty good, but their quarterback play, for one thing, tier 3, Mahomes has to start playing better. I've heard that maybe he's injured. I could see that because you add an extra couple of wins, that helps. Receiving room, the issue is they're so Tyreek Hill dependent at this point. I think Travis Kelce's obviously very good as well, but he is still a tight end. So you have Kelce and you have Hill, but when teams sort of take those 2 guys out of the game, what do you have? They don't really have that third option, and third options really matter. So if you get a third option, I think this can jump up to a tier 1 immediately, but you have to get that third option. And when you factor on, you're basically getting no help anywhere else. I mean, this really comes down to Mahomes is going to have to carry this team kicking and screaming into the playoffs, and so far he hasn't done that. So, yeah, I think it's fair to be concerned if you're a Chiefs fan, especially a team that, this isn't a team that wants to get to the playoffs. This is a team that wants a Super Bowl. Well, Mahomes is going to have to really work some magic. The lucky thing is that we've seen him work some magic before, so that's what you have going for you. The Carolina Panthers, the next team, tier 5 offensive line play, that checks out to me. Tier 4 quarterback play, that also maybe a little bit low. I might have Darnold in tier 3, but that's not a horrible thing. Receiving core hasn't been as good these past couple of weeks, and the defense, you still have that tier 1 coverage unit, so that's kind of what you're holding on to. But this has been a disappointing Carolina Panthers couple of weeks, and this is kind of why, Panthers fans got mad at me when I was a little bit hesitant to crown them after they had, beaten the Texans handedly, and were 3-0, because I was concerned about the competition, and now we've seen them, lose a couple of times to, they lost badly to Dallas, and they lost to a team in Philadelphia, who, if they're a playoff team, they should have beat. Now, I do have to say, I think they're better than 21. I think that they will get better, but how much better is the question? And a lot of it does hinge on the Sam Darnold of it all. He has to play better than he has the past couple of weeks. Can't turn the ball over as much. Number 22, you have the New York Giants right here. So Giants, first off, Daniel Jones, no longer the tier 1 quarterback that he had been under PFF, which checks out. Although it's still tier 2, you'll take that. It's kind of all they got going for them. Good receiving core, and I think Kadarius Toney getting starts certainly helps with that. Offensive line, not good. Not the worst in the league, but not good. And then the defense has just been really disappointing. So you factor that in, yeah, this is looking like, they have them as 6.9. I think that's probably optimistic. Number 23, the Atlanta Falcons here. Hey, how about Matt Ryan? He has played much better after we kind of all said, okay, he's washed up, he sucks. Well, he's had a couple good weeks, so hopefully he can continue that going a little bit. Receiving room still has been disappointing, but hey, maybe with the emergence of Kyle Pitts, this could make it look better. There's still not a ton of talent around this team. Everything else kind of checks out to me, but at least you have those couple of things to be happy about. And then number 24, the Washington football team, who has been horrible to begin this season, has improved a bit and has looked better. But still, 5.82 wins. So it's like, congratulations, you're not on the final panel anymore. You made it to panel 3, but you're still not looking very good. Their coverage has still been, coverage and quarterback, which are 2 of the 3 most important positions according to this algorithm. That wide receiver is the other one. And, with those 3 positions where you have, about 10 wins you can get between those 3, a little bit over 10 wins, actually. They can't even get 1 win out of that. That's really kind of been the issue, is that where they're good just isn't the premium stuff. To all of the offensive line and defensive line are the most important parts of football. Well, they have a great defensive line, great offensive line, not a very good team. That's kind of the issue, is you need it all, basically. And all right, final panel, the Houston Texans. They've kind of been consistently like at 25 this entire time. So they've been consistently not good. But also for Houston, I kind of think that, hey, them being anywhere other than 32 was a pleasant surprise for them this season. An element of it is hey, tier 4 quarterback play. That's promising. Hey, mediocre offensive line. You like that. Mediocre coverage unit. That's stunning, quite frankly, because it seemed like this was going to be a horrible coverage unit. So they just got some bright spots here and there. That's what's helpful. Next, the Indianapolis Colts, who actually have, tier 3 quarterback play right here. They're the only team on this panel to have above tier 4 quarterback play. So that's helpful. They just don't have a lot of help for Wentz. It's kind of funny where, he goes from a horrible situation to kind of another horrible situation. Receiving room hasn't been great. Offensive line has been bad. I guess they stopped the run well, but that's kind of all they do on defense well. So it's been a tough season so far for the Colts, but at least, hey, listen, if Carson Wentz ends up being a good quarterback, at least you got something out of it. But still, kind of a tough one for them. Number 27, the Pittsburgh Steelers here, who did improve from being number 32 last week. But yeah, Big Ben still not playing well. The receiving core still not playing well. The offensive line played decent, so you have that going for you. And your defense has played well. I think that the coverage has just been so inconsistent. That's kind of one of my concerns. But hey, if you can get the right defense on the right week, that can be good for Pittsburgh. They do have a couple of wins, and a couple of wins against decent teams too. The Broncos are at least decent, I think, and the Bills are good. So it's kind of surprising that they're just kind of a weird team. I don't know, because I agree that they should stink, but they also have won some games. It might just be one of those things where coaching isn't factored into this formula, but Mike Tomlin's a really good coach, so that's another aspect. Number 28, you have the Chicago Bears, who they're another team where they've won some games, so it's kind of okay, do we really, how much can we completely write off this team? Because, yeah, I kind of agree with everything that they're saying about the Bears, but the Bears are 3-2 right now. So if the Bears win next week, they're leading their division because they play Green Bay. They're currently, a mediocre offensive line, which I agree with. It's funny because everyone blames the O-line, but the O-line's actually been probably the bright spot of this offense, quite frankly. Still tier 4 quarterback play, not much going in the receiving room. But, you look over at the defense, and they have no points for the defense whatsoever, which is shocking to me. I do feel like what I've seen, so this is kind of where I'm going to disagree with PFF, which, again, is fine. What I want to be clear, it's when I disagree with 7 things, there's 1,000 things on here. So that's good. Like we're going to disagree at some stuff. I think the defense has been better because I think they've been able to stop the run in a cover 2 scheme a lot, which has then forced other teams basically into pickles, quite frankly. So has there been an element of luck with Chicago? Sure, but we said the same thing last year. They still went 8-8. I could see something similar happening with Chicago. I think their defense isn't getting enough wins here. Still not a great team, though, I would say. Number 29, the Miami Dolphins, who, again, everyone wants to blame it on the Tua injury. Well, they're still getting tier 4 quarterback play. I mean, did you really expect Tua to give you tier 3 quarterback play? Okay, maybe. So sure, I'll give you an extra win. They're still, so you're better than the Texans now, but you're still on this final panel. You're not looking good. You're still under 6 wins. It's been a tough season for them. I mean, no wins for their wide receiving core, no wins for their running back room, no wins for their offensive line. Defense has been good. Now, their coverage is better than tier 3. We all know that. Tampa Bay made them look worse. They're going to look better throughout the rest of the season. Give them an extra win and a half for that. So that makes them look a little better. And again, if you want to give an extra win for Tua being tier 3, which I wouldn't, but hey, you might disagree, you could add 2.5 wins to that, make it like a 6.7 win team, but it's still a long ways away. You need to add a couple of wins for the receiving core, and you're just running out of time. You're already 1-4. I think it's safe to say the Dolphins are probably done right here. Number 30, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, the winless Jacksonville Jaguars here, not satisfied with 1-0. They have, offensive line's been solid. Again, Trevor Lawrence, it's tier 5, but he's shown flashes, which is all you want from a young quarterback. Running game has been awesome. James Robinson is fantastic, and you see a lot of zeros there, right? No wins for quarterback, no wins for receiver, no wins for run defense, no wins for coverage, no wins for pass rush. It's just a really bad roster, and this is kind of one of the issues with tanking, right? I get the logic with tanking. I actually don't even disagree with it because, you get that tier 1 quarterback for 15 years. Okay, you can build a roster in 15 years, but just kind of the flip side and the issue is you really have to nail that draft pick because the rest of your team is now so decimated. It's hard to build a roster around it, although I still would probably say that the best way to win a Super Bowl is with either an elite quarterback or having a good team with a quarterback on a rookie contract. It is possible to win one without either of those two, but those seem to be like the two easiest ways to do it. Number 31, the Detroit Lions. So you have, not a lot of talent here either. Hey, Jared Goff giving you a win. Nicely done there. And then there's a few tier 4s across the board. Just not a lot of talent here. But, that's okay. The Lions are kind of doing what Jacksonville did a little bit of just saying, hey, we're not going to be great this year, but, we're going to hopefully try to build a culture this season with Dan Campbell. Get a quarterback, probably, I would assume. I mean, Jared Goff hasn't been the issue, but just when you have a top 5 pick, the most value you can get is a quarterback. It's not worth, getting like a safety with a top 5 pick. It's positional value is a real thing. At least that's my opinion on it. But yeah, that's how the Lions aren't good. We didn't expect them to be good, but that's okay. They're fun to watch. Number 32, the New York Jets, who are not that fun to watch, quite frankly. Offensive line's been good. Again, it's funny what people choose to blame. The offensive line's gotten probably the most criticism, and it's been the bright spot of this football team. Offensive line's been good, especially in run blocking. The issue is that they just don't have, backs that can run. Actually, I take that back a little bit. The running blocking hasn't been incredible, but offensive line's been solid. I would also say I'm not sure if it's tier 2. It might be tier 3, but it's been a decent part of this team. The issue is, Zach Wilson's very much showed his inexperience. The receiving core has been just a complete mess. Running game has not gotten anything going. You haven't been able to stop the run. Their defense hasn't been great. This is a bad football team. People have given credit to the defense, but I haven't really seen it that impressive. Even the team that has a win is still below the 2 winless teams currently, and I think that's fair, quite frankly. I do think the Jets are the worst team through 5 weeks that I've seen. Now, they could get better. That's the thing is, I kind of expect the Jaguars and Jets, their young quarterbacks, to get better towards the end of the season, whereas Goff's going to be Goff the whole season probably. So that's kind of why, if I had to predict, I'd probably put the Lions at the number 1 overall pick. But as of right now, I think it's fair to say that the Jets have been the worst team. So yeah, that's what I think. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Always love making these. Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.